Unicorn and Lion were fighting for the crown. Unicorn beat Lion with a bear from out of town. Some cheered victory, some got very down. Some sold their assets and hurried out of town. I've never been patriotic. It seems absurd to me to become so attached to an arbitrarily drawn border on a map that you just happen to have been dropped into by virtue of the vagina lottery. You know, you could have been born anywhere. There's no particular reason to be proud of where you happen to have dropped out. And yet, people attach nationalism even to horrendous countries whose governments and history and culture is just fucking terrible. And the UK isn't one to be particularly proud of either. The closest stirring to patriotism that I get is when people get British history wrong. That's as close as I get. Outrage at people getting the facts wrong. That's as close as I get to patriotism. I am, however, ashamed to be British at the moment. We've allowed our already sickly democracy and wildly outdated institutions to be perverted. And a minority of headbangers have forced through a massively destructive act of self-harm onto the country, the worst since Suez. We've been essentially taken advantage of by foreign media barons, probably by Russian intelligence operations. The report is still being sat on, but we do know that Aaron Banks and others have links to Russia. I know people don't like to hear more Russia, but there's no particular way of knowing. But we do know that there were a lot of sort of grey, semi-invisible Facebook adverts, underhanded techniques, misuse of data, enormous illegal overspends by the Leave campaign. Yeah, we know all this. It's not a secret. And yet we're enforcing the result of an illegally run advisory referendum that isn't even supported by most people anymore. In polls for over a year at this point, I'm fairly certain, and at the general election 52.9% voted for parties that promised to revoke or to hold a second referendum. And yet here we are. It's so fundamentally stupid and masochistic. And as I've endlessly warned, the Conservatives are already taking their landslide victory, which was the result of a 1% increase in vote share, as carte blanche to fuck up and sell off anything that isn't already being fucked up by Brexit. Yeah, it's become an excuse. And they're taking this massive landslide of support to mean that their entire agenda is approved somehow by the country, which it isn't. You know, the BBC is on the chopping block, the NHS is under constant attack. Not that the BBC has been anything but a shadow of its former self these days. Its independence has been undermined, its funding is being attacked. They want to put their people in charge of the BBC. I shan't be celebrating. I shall be mourning. Believe me, if I could leave at this point, I would. But that's one of the big things that a lot of people don't seem to grasp. The rich will be fine. A lot of them will be making a lot of money if they're disaster capitalists. They'll be able to buy their EU citizenship, and a lot of them already have, decamping to a flag of convenience like Luxembourg or wherever. They'll be fine. It's people like me, and ironically like the poorer people that seem to have mostly voted for this, who are going to be cut off from the opportunities and freedoms to live, love and work in Europe that we once had. You locked me and people like me in this shit heap with you, and I'm disinclined to forgive or forget. It's remarkably small consolation to know that you fucked yourselves over hardest of all, as we're already seeing as the Tories cut funding in the north and channel the money to the south.
None of you seem to understand. I'm not locked in here with you. You're locked in here with me.
Conversely, I do feel a sense of pride and investment in the European Union. The UK joined the European Union the year I was born, 1975. At that time we were the sick man of Europe, and in no small part was it our joining the European project that helped drag us out of those economic and social doldrums. The European Union represents an optimistic, slightly more ethical point of view and way of going about things. Unprecedented peace, prosperity and unity across Europe, an organisation that helped everyone within Europe, that brought us all up, rose us all up. And in a world increasingly dominated by a nationalistic, right-wing and militaristic United States, and an authoritarian, censorious, increasingly dystopian China, with Russia dicking with everybody, it's nice to have that big economic bloc of developed, civilized nations with a slightly more communitarian, internationalist point of view and slightly more ethical policies and so on. Not all that's difficult when you look at the competition. But it was this optimistic, forward-looking thing. A first step to a united federation of planets, if you will. It was, it still is, and it may even progress faster and better without us. It still is all that. It's just now I feel that we've been torn away from it. I marched for it. I did my best. I made the arguments. I told people, the plus sides, debunked the downsides, but we're having this nationalistic spasm of stupidity. And even though it's a minority of people, it's suited some people in power to shove this through. And who's going to be hurt? The very people that were fooled into voting for it. And for what? No, what's the upside? There isn't one. There are no wonderful new opportunities. There's nothing. There is nothing good about this. We don't get anything. We never lost anything. But we are damaging ourselves by doing it. And missing out on this wonderful, forward-looking, optimistic prospect for the future, not just of Europe, but of everywhere, of the globe, of the human race. It sounds grandiose, but these are these faltering first steps. And I would much rather Europe existed as a counterbalance to these other forces, with a more liberal, more open, more free perspective than exists anywhere else in the world at the moment. I'm fairly sure we'll rejoin. Whether it happens in my lifetime or not, I don't know. But one can hope. Zang.
You're down there, right now, with Vulcans, Andorians, and Tellarites, getting ready to sign the charter. The membership is going to grow. Dozens, eventually hundreds of species. A united federation of planets.
The gallows is cold and the gibbet is lonely. We'll make things hard for you here. The gallows is cold and the gibbet is lonely. We'll make things hard for you, Joni, my dear.